The command center of Angel's Haven hummed with nervous energy as Rich Greaves stood before the holographic display, his eyes scanning the intricate web of connections sprawling across the galaxy. Each glowing line represented a lead, a potential link in the vast network of trafficking and corruption they had stumbled upon. "It's bigger than we thought," Nora said, her voice tight with a mixture of determination and disbelief. The cannibal colony was just the tip of the iceberg. Rich nodded grimly. "And now the whole galaxy knows about it." He gestured to another screen where news reports from various systems flashed by, each headline more sensational than the last. "Cannibal ring exposed. Remnant angels vigilantes, or saviors. Galactic Council demands answers." Trevor leaned against a nearby console, his usual cocky demeanor subdued. "We did the right thing, boss, no matter what they're saying out there." "I know," Rich replied, running a hand through his hair. "But this complicates things. We've got politicians breathing down our necks, media hounds at every turn, and a network of monsters still out there, preying on innocents." As if on cue, a priority message flashed across the main screen. It was from a high-ranking official in the Galactic Council, demanding an immediate explanation for the Remnant Angels' unauthorized intervention in sovereign affairs. Rich's jaw clenched. "Nora, draft a response. Keep it diplomatic, but make it clear we won't stand by while sentient beings are being eaten." As Nora set to work, Rich's eyes fell on Luis, who sat hunched over a terminal in the corner. The young tech specialist had been uncharacteristically quiet since their return from the cannibal colony. His fingers moved over the keys with their usual speed, but there was a frantic energy to his movements, a haunted look in his eyes. Rich approached him quietly. "Luis, how are you holding up?" Luis didn't look up from his screen. "I'm fine," he muttered, "just processing the data. There's so much here, so many connections. If we can just follow them all, maybe we can." His voice trailed off, and Rich saw his hands were shaking slightly. He placed a gentle hand on Luis's shoulder. "Maybe it's time for a break. We all need to." "No," Luis snapped, shrugging off Rich's hand. "We can't stop. Not now. Not when we're so close to. He broke off, his breath coming in short gasps. Rich recognized the signs of a panic attack and quickly guided Luis away from the terminal and towards a quieter corner of the room. "Deep breaths, Luis," he said softly. "That's it. In and out." As Luis struggled to regain his composure, Rich looked around at his team. He saw the same strain etched on all their faces, the weight of what they had witnessed pressing down on them. They had faced countless dangers before, had seen their share of the galaxy's darker side. But this was different. The sheer inhumanity of what they had uncovered had shaken them all to their core. Rich knew they needed time to process, to heal. But the galaxy wouldn't wait. The network was still out there, and every moment they delayed meant more innocent lives at risk. As Luis's breathing steadied, Rich made a decision. "All right, team. Here's what we're going to do. Nora, you handle the political fallout. Keep the council off our backs as much as you can. Trevor, I want you coordinating with our contacts in law enforcement. We need to start moving on these leads." He turned to Luis, his voice gentle but firm. "And you, my friend, are going to get some rest. That's an order." Luis opened his mouth to protest, but Rich cut him off. "We need you at your best, Luis, and right now you're running on fumes. Get some sleep, clear your head. The data will still be here when you get back." As the team dispersed to their tasks, Rich turned back to the holographic display. The web of corruption glowed before him, a challenge and a promise. They had struck a blow against the darkness, had shed light on horrors long hidden. But the fight was far from over. With a deep breath, he squared his shoulders and got to work. The sleek, unmarked shuttle glided silently through the neon-lit canyons of Nexus Prime's financial district. Inside, Rich and Nora sat in tense silence, their eyes fixed on the looming headquarters of Galacticorp, one of the largest conglomerates in the sector. "Are you sure about this?" Nora asked, adjusting her elaborate disguise. "If we're caught." "We won't be," Rich replied, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. The intel is solid. Galacticorp is neck-deep in this trafficking network. We just need to find the proof. As they approached the towering skyscraper, Rich couldn't help but reflect on the past week. The political pressure had been relentless, with the Galactic Council demanding oversight of their operations. Media drones had been circling Angel's Haven non-stop, hungry for any scrap of information about the infamous cannibal colony. But none of that compared to the strain he saw in his team. Trevor had thrown himself into work, coordinating with law enforcement contacts with a grim intensity that was unlike his usual easygoing nature. Nora had been juggling political negotiations and mission planning, the circles under her eyes growing darker by the day. And Louise. Rich's concern for the young tech specialist had only grown. Despite the ordered rest, Louise had been pushing himself harder than ever, diving deeper into the data they'd recovered. There was a manic edge to his work now, a desperation that worried Rich more than he cared to admit. The shuttle docked at Galacticorp's VIP landing pad, snapping Rich back to the present. He and Nora stepped out, playing the roles of wealthy investors to perfection. "Remember," Rich murmured as they entered the opulent lobby, "we're just here for a routine meeting. In and out." Their cover got them past the initial security checkpoints, but as they neared the executive floors, Rich felt the familiar tingle of danger at the back of his neck. Something was off. Just as they reached the CEO's office, alarms began to blare. "Intruder alert. Security breach on level 85. Rich and Nora exchanged a quick glance before springing into action. They burst into the office, catching the CEO, a portly man named Drakon, off guard. "What is the meaning of this?" Drakon sputtered, reaching for a hidden button under his desk. Rich was faster. In one fluid motion, he vaulted over the desk and pinned Drakon's arm. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," he growled. "We know about your involvement with the trafficking network. It's over." Nora was already at the computer terminal, her fingers flying over the keys as she downloaded incriminating files. "Rich, we've got company." Security forces were converging on the office. Rich could hear the heavy footsteps approaching. He turned to Drakon, his voice low and dangerous. "You have two choices. Come clean now and help us take down this network, or go down with it. Decide fast." The fear in Drakon's eyes was palpable. For a moment, Rich thought he might cooperate. But then the CEO's gaze hardened. "You Remnant angels think you're so righteous," he spat. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. This goes deeper than you can imagine." Before Rich could respond, the office door burst open. Security forces flooded in, weapons trained on Rich and Nora. What followed was a blur of action. Rich and Nora fought their way out, using every trick in their considerable arsenal. They escaped by the skin of their teeth, the stolen data their only consolation prize. As their shuttle sped away from Nexus Prime, Rich's comm unit crackled to life. It was Trevor, his voice tight with urgency. "Boss, we've got a problem. It's Louise. He's gone." Rich felt his blood run cold. "What do you mean, gone?" "He's not at the base. Left some cryptic message about finishing what we started, and boss. He took a ship, armed to the teeth." Rich closed his eyes, the weight of leadership pressing down on him like never before. They had the intel they needed to start dismantling the network, but at what cost? And now Louise, traumatized and unstable, was out there on some personal crusade. As Nexus Prime faded into the distance, Rich knew that the real challenges were just beginning. The threads of the network were unraveling, but so too was the fabric of his team. And somewhere out in the vast expanse of space, Louise was on a collision course with destiny, driven by demons that Rich could only imagine. The hunt was on, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. The command center of Angel's Haven was a hive of frantic activity. Screens flickered with data streams and star charts, while the air buzzed with urgent communications. At the center of it all stood Rich, his face etched with lines of worry and fatigue. "Any sign of him?" he asked, his eyes fixed on the main display, where a blinking dot represented Louise's last known location. Trevor shook his head, frustration evident in his voice. "Nothing concrete. He's good, boss. Really good. He's masking his trail, bouncing his signal off a dozen different relays. Rich nodded grimly. He'd trained Luis himself, after all. The young tech specialist's skills were formidable, and now they were being turned against them. Nora approached, a data pad in her hand. "I've been going through Luis's personal logs," she said, her voice laced with concern. "Rich, it's not good. The things he saw at the cannibal colony, they broke something in him. His entries become increasingly erratic, filled with talk of cleansing the galaxy and burning out the infection." Rich felt a chill run down his spine. He'd known Luis was struggling, but he'd had no idea how deep the trauma ran. "We need to find him," he said, his voice hard with determination, "before he does something he can't come back from." Just then, an alert flashed across the main screen. Trevor's eyes widened as he read the incoming data. "Boss, we've got something. A Remnant Angels ship just attacked a mining outpost in the Viridian system. No casualties, but it fits Luis's MO. Surgical strikes, data theft, and..." He paused, swallowing hard, and a message left behind. "The Angels of Vengeance are coming." Rich's jaw clenched. This was worse than he'd feared. Luis wasn't just running away, he was on a mission, a crusade of his own making, and every action he took in the name of the Remnant Angels put their entire organization at risk. "Nora, what have you found on the network's origins?" Rich asked, his mind racing to connect the dots. Nora pulled up a series of ancient star charts and historical records. "It's fascinating and terrifying," she said. The data Luis uncovered before he left. It suggests that this cannibal network isn't just decades or centuries old. We're talking millennia. There are references to a cult of the Devourers in texts dating back to the early days of interstellar travel. Rich felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. They weren't just dealing with a criminal organization, this was something older, something that had woven itself into the very fabric of galactic society over thousands of years. And Luis figured this out, Rich said, the realization dawning on him. He's not just lashing out randomly, he's tracing the network back to its source. Trevor nodded, a grim smile on his face, hunting for Patient Zero, the one who started it all. For a moment, the command center fell silent as the magnitude of the situation sank in. They were on the verge of uncovering a conspiracy that spanned millennia, with tendrils reaching into every corner of the galaxy. And one of their own, driven to the brink by the horrors he'd witnessed, was out there alone, taking on an enemy he couldn't possibly defeat by himself. Rich straightened, his voice ringing out with authority. "All right, here's what we're going to do. Trevor, you keep tracking Luis. Use every resource we have, call in every favor. I want to know his next move before he does." He turned to Nora. "You and I are going to follow Luis's trail. We'll hit every target he's struck, gather what intel we can. If he's hunting for the origin of this network, we need to be right behind him." As the team sprang into action, Rich felt a mix of pride and fear. Pride in the dedication and skill of his people, and fear for Luis, out there alone, fighting a battle that threatened to consume him. The hunt was on, not just for the secrets of an ancient evil, but for the soul of one of their own. And Rich knew that the fate of the Remnant Angels, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. As he prepared to depart, Rich cast one last look at the star chart, showing Luis's path of destruction. "Hold on, kid," he murmured. "We're coming for you. Just don't lose yourself before we get there." With that, he strode towards the hangar, ready to chase both ancient shadows and a friend lost in the darkness of his own mind. Their ship cut through the inky blackness of space, leaving a trail of ionized particles in its wake. Rich stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the view screen as they approached their latest destination, a remote outpost on the fringes of known space. "This is the third facility Luis has hit," Nora said, reviewing the data on her pad. "Research station, officially dedicated to xenobiology. Unofficially." "Let me guess," Rich interrupted grimly. "Another link in the cannibal network's chain." Nora nodded. "Luis was here less than 48 hours ago, left quite a mess behind." As they docked with the station, Rich couldn't shake the growing sense of dread in his gut. Each site they'd visited had been progressively more devastated than the last. Luis wasn't just gathering information anymore, he was out for blood. The interior of the station was a scene of chaos. Scorch marks from blaster fire scarred the walls, and the acrid smell of smoke still hung in the air. Bodies of security personnel and researchers lay strewn about, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. "He's getting worse," Rich muttered, kneeling to examine one of the fallen. "This isn't just about gathering intel anymore. He's executing them." Nora's voice crackled over the comm. "Rich, you need to see this. Central lab, 2 levels down." When Rich arrived, he found Nora standing before a large holographic display. The image showed a sprawling network of connections, linking planets, corporations, and individuals across the galaxy. At the center was a pulsing red node, labeled simply Origin. "This is what Luis was after," Nora said, her voice hushed with awe and horror. "It's a map of the entire network, going back thousands of years. And this," she pointed to the central node, "this is where it all began." Rich felt a chill run down his spine. "Can you tell where it is?" Nora shook her head. "The exact coordinates are encrypted, but based on the surrounding data, it's somewhere in the void sector." Rich's blood ran cold. The void sector was a region of space so ancient and mysterious that most modern star charts marked it simply as "Here be dragons." If the origin of the cannibal network was hidden there, it explained how it had remained secret for so long. Just then, Trevor's voice crackled over their comms. "Boss, we've got a problem. A big one." Rich listened as Trevor explained the situation. While they'd been chasing Luis, their political opponents had been busy. Footage of Luis's attacks had been leaked to the media, painting the Remnant Angels as dangerous vigilantes. The Galactic Council was in an uproar, with some members calling for the immediate disbanding of the organization. "They're using Luis's actions against us," Trevor concluded, "saying we can't control our own people, that we're a threat to galactic security." Rich closed his eyes, feeling the weight of leadership pressing down on him like never before. They were so close to unraveling the mystery, to striking a killing blow against an evil that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. But with each passing moment, the noose was tightening around them. "Nora, download everything you can from this system," he ordered. "We need to move fast." As Nora worked, Rich's mind raced. They needed to find Luis, to stop him before he did any more damage. But they also needed to follow this lead, to find the origin point of the network and end it once and for all. And they needed to do it all while the political forces of the galaxy aligned against them, threatening to shut down the Remnant Angels for good. As they prepared to leave the station, Rich made his decision. "Set a course for the void sector," he told Nora. "We're going to find this origin point." "And Luis?" she asked. Rich's jaw set in grim determination. "If I'm right, that's exactly where he's headed. We'll find him there." As their ship disengaged from the station and pointed its nose towards the unknown, Rich couldn't shake the feeling that they were hurtling towards a confrontation that would change everything. The fate of Luis, the Remnant Angels, and perhaps the entire galaxy hung in the balance. And somewhere out there, in the depths of the void sector, ancient evils stirred, waiting for the coming storm. The void sector lived up to its ominous reputation. As the ship navigated through swirling nebulae and treacherous gravitational eddies, Rich felt as if they were plunging into the very maw of the galaxy itself. "Sensors are going haywire," Nora reported, her fingers dancing over the controls. "Whatever's out here, it's playing havoc with our systems." Rich nodded grimly. "Keep us on course. We can't turn back now." As they pushed deeper into the void, strange anomalies began to appear on their view screens. Ghostly shapes flitted at the edge of perception, and time itself seemed to stretch and warp around them. Suddenly, an alert blared through the ship. "Unidentified vessel detected," the computer announced, matching known signature Remnant Angels ship Vengeance. Rich's heart leapt. "Luis," he breathed. "We found him." They tracked the ship to a massive space station, ancient beyond reckoning. Its architecture was alien and unsettling, all twisting spires and impossible angles that seemed to hurt the eye. "That has to be it," Nora whispered. "The origin point." As they approached, they saw Luis's ship docked at one of the station's lower levels. Rich made a quick decision. "Nora, you're with me. We're going in after Luis. Trevor, keep the ship ready for a quick exit. I have a feeling we're going to need it." Rich and Nora boarded the station, the air thick with an oppressive, ancient malevolence. They moved swiftly through twisting corridors, following the trail of destruction Luis had left in his wake. They found him in a vast chamber at the heart of the station. Luis stood before a pulsing, organic-looking terminal, his face illuminated by its sickly glow. "Luis," Rich called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Step away from there. It's over." Luis turned, and Rich's heart sank at the sight of his friend. Luis's eyes were wild, filled with a manic intensity that bordered on madness. "You don't understand," he said, his voice cracking. "I've seen it, Rich. The truth. It's all here, the whole history of their evil." "I know," Rich said, taking a cautious step forward, "and we'll expose it all, I promise. But not like this. Come back with us, Luis. We need you." For a moment, it seemed like Luis might listen, but then his face hardened. "No," he snarled. "You're too weak, too bound by your precious rules. This has to end here and now, and I'm the only one who can do it." He turned back to the terminal, his fingers flying over its surface. Alarms began to blare throughout the station. "What have you done?" Nora cried. "Initiated a purge," Luis said, a manic grin spreading across his face. "This station, all the data it contains, every person connected to the network, it's all going to burn." Rich realized with horror what Luis had done. He had triggered a self-destruct sequence that would not only destroy the station but send out a signal that would activate kill switches in the implants of everyone connected to the cannibal network. "Luis, stop!" Rich lunged forward, but it was too late. The terminal exploded in a shower of sparks, knocking them all off their feet. As the station began to shake itself apart around them, Rich made a desperate decision. He tackled Luis, pinning him to the ground. "Nora, get back to the ship. Now." Nora hesitated for a moment, then nodded and sprinted away. Rich struggled with Luis, trying to subdue his friend without hurting him. "Let me go," Luis screamed, thrashing wildly. "Don't you see? This is the only way." "No," Luis, Rich said, his voice firm but compassionate. "This isn't justice. It's vengeance. And it's not who we are." As the chamber began to collapse around them, Rich saw a moment of clarity flash in Luis's eyes. The madness receded, replaced by fear and regret. "Rich," he whispered, "what have I done?" "It's okay," Rich said, helping Luis to his feet. "We're going to fix this. Together. But first we need to get out of here." They ran through the crumbling station, barely making it back to their ship before the whole structure began to implode. As they sped away, the ancient space station collapsed in on itself, taking with it millennia of dark secrets. But Rich knew that their fight was far from over. The network had been dealt a crippling blow, but at what cost? And how would they face the political fallout that awaited them back in civilized space? As Luis sobbed quietly in the ship's medbay, Rich stood at the viewscreen, watching the last remnants of the origin point fade into the distance. They had won a victory today, but the war was far from over. The team's ship emerged from the swirling chaos of the void sector, battered but intact. Rich stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the familiar stars of known space. Behind him, Luis sat quietly, his earlier manic energy replaced by a hollow, haunted look. "Report," Rich said, his voice weary but resolute. Nora's fingers flew over her console. "The signal from the origin point spread faster than we could track. Early reports are coming in from across the galaxy. Thousands of suspected network members. Dead. Implants self-destructed. And that's just the beginning." Rich closed his eyes, feeling the weight of what had transpired. They had struck a massive blow against the cannibal network, but at a terrible cost. The line between justice and vengeance had been blurred, perhaps irrevocably. Boss Trevor's voice crackled over the comm. "We've got an incoming transmission." It's the Galactic Council. They're demanding our immediate surrender. Rich took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Put them through. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the stern faces of the council members. Their spokesperson, a gray-skinned Thraxian, leaned forward. Rich Greaves, you and your Remnant Angels are hereby charged with excessive use of force, violation of sovereign territories, and mass murder. Stand down and prepare to be boarded. Rich straightened, his voice calm but filled with conviction. With all due respect, Counselor, you don't have the full picture. What we've uncovered goes beyond anything you can imagine. A conspiracy spanning millennia, rooted in the very foundations of our galactic society. He gestured to Nora, who began transmitting the data they'd recovered from the origin point. This evidence proves the existence and extent of the cannibal network. Yes, we made mistakes. Yes, we crossed lines. But we've also dealt a crippling blow to an evil that has plagued our galaxy for far too long. The council members murmured among themselves, clearly shaken by what they were seeing. Rich pressed on. We're prepared to face the consequences of our actions. But first, we need your help to finish what we've started. There are still elements of the network out there, and innocents who need our protection. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then, slowly, the Thraxian nodded. Very well, Greaves. We'll review your evidence. In the meantime, you and your team will remain under house arrest at your base. This isn't over. As the transmission cut off, Rich turned to his team. They all looked exhausted, battered by the physical and emotional toll of their mission. But there was also a glimmer of hope in their eyes, a sense that they had accomplished something truly momentous. What now? Boss Trevor asked. Rich's gaze fell on Louise, who looked up with eyes full of remorse and uncertainty. Now Rich said softly, we heal. We reflect on what we've done, the lines we've crossed, and we find a way to move forward, to be better. He addressed the entire team. The Remnant Angels started as a force for good in this galaxy. We've stumbled, we've made mistakes. But our mission remains the same, to protect the innocent, to fight injustice wherever we find it. It won't be easy, rebuilding trust, proving ourselves again. But I believe in us, in all of us. As they set course for Angel's Haven, Rich knew that the hardest part of their journey was still ahead. They would face inquiries, possibly trials. The galaxy would scrutinize their every move. But they had exposed a great evil, had brought light to the darkest corners of the galaxy. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you loved it. Please remember to subscribe if you did like it so you can see more videos like this. And please give us a like and a comment too. I'll see you in the next one.